I haven't seen one like this on a high-resolution next-rad Doppler radar in a long time. Boy, I sure hate to tell you this, friends, but it looks like that thing is right on top of Greensburg. So your time is up.
Hi guys, my name is Carly. Welcome back to my channel. Get ready because today I've got a heavy one for you. Today we're going to be talking about Greensburg, Kansas. I got a few really good suggestions in the last couple videos about tornado outbreaks or specific tornadoes to cover moving forward, and they're definitely on the list, so I really appreciate all the recommendations. I have a giant list to go through with the bigger events that I'm going to talk about, or the more historic ones. I want to make sure that they are done absolutely as perfect as I can get them, and like a piece of work that I can be proud of. Yeah, so with all that being said, let's get right into the event. Greensburg, Kansas is located in the heart of Tornado Alley, just southwest of the state's capital, Kansas City. Greensburg has always been a small, tight-knit farming community. People who live here are family-oriented and enjoy being close to other people in their community.
Small town of Greensburg, population 1,500, sits 2 hours west of Wichita, at the heart of what meteorologists call Tornado Alley.
Usually I like to talk about what a city is sort of known for and give a little bit of a backstory before we talk about the event, because I think it's important to have more context. And I will start by saying that Greensburg, Kansas is known for some of the strangest things, and I mean that in the most sincere and positive way. Let me give you an example. The town is known for having the largest hand-dug well in the world, which is pretty cool. It's known as Big Well, and it was first constructed in 1887. This well hasn't actually been used since 1932, but it has been a museum in the city since then. Greensburg is also known for having the world's largest palisite meteor ever discovered, weighing over 1,000 pounds, which is pretty cool. The meteorite also has its own museum if you'd like to go check it out. And we'll come back to this meteorite later. It's not the last time we're going to hear about it today. So you can see that despite Greensburg being a smaller town, it actually has a lot of unique history, which I think is pretty cool and gives it a lot of character in my opinion. In 2007, the population of Greensburg is around 1,500. And this is actually on the higher end of Greensburg's population since its founding in 1887. The highest population that Greensburg ever had was in the 1970s, just under 2,000 people, so 1,500 is still pretty strong. So now we're going to talk, of course, about the meteorological setup. May and June are peak tornado months for the Great Plains, and the Greensburg tornado starts out with our ever classic Tornado Alley outbreak ingredients. On May 3rd, a strong and slow-moving system of low pressure is digging into Colorado from the northwest. With the low pressure system, we have a warm front rising out in front of it, bringing warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico into the Great Plains. Along with that system, a strong jet stream is causing screaming winds into the upper atmosphere.
There is. A halting mass of low pressure approaching the Great Plains has begun to tap warm, moist air flowing north across Texas and Oklahoma.
Already we have a really dynamic system with strong upper-level winds. We have instability from the Gulf of Mexico. So now that we have our instability, moisture, and wind shear, an outbreak is just waiting to happen. As a classic Tornado Alley outbreak is beginning to set up, our final main ingredient comes into play for the day of the outbreak on May 4th, a dry line. The dry line is the visible divided boundary between the drier air mass and the humid air mass. and it's positioned perfectly over the plains. These dry lines are often initiation points for explosive storms once they're able to get started. Seeing all these ingredients come together for a potentially dangerous tornado outbreak, the SPC decides to issue a moderate risk for severe weather, the second highest risk possible. The risk area would cover western Kansas and included a 15% hatched risk for tornadoes. Now, 15% is already extremely high for a tornado risk, but the fact that it's hatched means that there's a 10% chance or higher of strong EF-2 to EF-5 tornadoes occurring. The SPC's convective outlook also uses pretty strong wording, which is indicative of their level of concern. Along with favorable instability, there is very strong deep layer shear, which supports strong rotation. Several tornadoes expected, and a few that will be both significant and long-lived. So when you see them use something like strong rotation and tornadoes expected, you can conclude that the SPC really expects this to be a dangerous day.
We know that there'll be a certain number of tornadoes every spring. Usually they're not too severe. Just have to keep an eye on them, make sure you're not in the path.
Friday, May 4th, 2007, the day of the Greensburg Tornado. By early morning hours, temperatures are already in the low to mid 80s. With moisture and instability quickly rising, the morning sounding showed Cape values that were up to 5,500 joules per kilogram. For reference, 2,000 joules per kilogram is enough for tornadoes most of the time. 4,000 joules per kilogram is considered extreme by the National Weather Service, so 5,500 is explosive amounts of energy for these storms to work with. These storms were about to absolutely eat that up. The Cape value really helps reflect just how volatile the atmosphere was on this day, like a powder keg ready to explode.
The day is unseasonably warm, over 85 degrees, and Chris is thirsty.
We stopped off to get something to drink. I didn't know that was going to be the last time I was going to see the house, or the town for that.
Tornado watches would be issued for the risk areas, and all that was left to do was wait.
It was one of those days where you just knew it wasn't good. The weather was unsettled, it was windy, you could tell the barometric pressure was low because you'd hear the drains gurgling.
I remember it being really hot and just humid and just not very nice weather. Something about it just kind of put me on edge.
Fortunately, the atmosphere would actually be capped for a large part of the afternoon, so the storms weren't really able to go through the cap and explode like they first thought. But as the day progressed, the cap would slowly start to be eroded and eventually break. By early evening hours, the atmospheric cap had fully broken, and the most intense supercells would begin forming across northwestern Oklahoma into southwestern Kansas. Just after 5 p.m., a rogue supercell forms in the northeastern corner of Texas, traveling through rural land. The cell slowly began to organize itself as it moved northeast through the entirety of Oklahoma and eventually enter Kansas. As it enters Kansas, the rotation is tight enough to trigger the first tornado warning at 8:35 p.m. in Clark County. This would be the Greensburg supercell. And normally, while the strongest tornadoes are generally associated with peak daytime heating, these supercells had such a prime atmospheric condition out ahead of them. Even after the loss of daytime heating hours, these storms were able to produce tornadoes, strong tornadoes, even after the sun went down. Just after 9 p.m., the storm would be confirmed as a tornado on the ground by spotters.
You guys in downtown yet? Yeah, stuck at the stoplights. Rock and roll! Woo!
He notices several trucks stopped along the road.
We noticed storm spotters sitting on 183 and 54 highway. My brother had actually made the comment, there must be going to be something going on.
They would capture footage, and this would be the formation of the Greensburg Tornado.
What are we doing?
Just because it's Ketters doesn't mean it fucking kill us. No.
The twister, like many of the most violent ones, began as a small rope-like appendage. It churned through fields of rural Kansas, pulling up grass, knocking over trees, and not really doing much harm. However, each second that passed, it grew, morphing shape and color as it picked up more debris, growing stronger with every minute.
Whatever road we're coming up to, as we move out, we don't want to take that yet because the tornado's still on that road.
Get on 54.
Yeah, I think if we keep going south, we're actually going to get a good view of this updraft here in about, I don't know, maybe about 5 miles or so.
Alright, sounds like a plan.
All right.
So we're going to continue south?
I say we continue south, and I think we're going to be able to get an updraft of this thing.
As the tornado continues its northeast trajectory, increasing in size and intensity, it now becomes apparent that this tornado is moving right for Greensburg.
Have a large tornado moving to the northeast, directly toward Greensburg. So I cannot emphasize enough at this point, it is extremely important for everyone in the Greensburg area to move to shelter, anywhere from Greensburg on south. Now,
As it approaches Greensburg, Doppler radar measures winds rushing around its center at 100 miles per hour.
Turned on the TV because we wanted to watch the radar. We wanted to check, see what kind of storms there were and where they were at. And I was eating supper and the sirens went off.
The sirens can only mean one thing: a tornado has been spotted.
At 9:38 p.m., storm chasers report the tornado is now half a mile wide in diameter and multiple vortices are spinning around the main circulation.
Wedge, there were like 3 tornadoes east of the wedge. Oh, wow. Are you seeing what we're talking about? Yeah. It's a big wedge up there, dude. There's a gigantic wedge, and then other
The tornado is no longer a smaller rope-like appendage, just churning up grass and trees as it moves through a rural area. It's now a massive half-mile wide wedge tornado moving straight for a city.
a very dangerous situation unfolding in southwest Kansas for one of our counties. Here we have a situation where we have a large tornado confirmed just to the southwest of Greensburg. Again, this is a large tornado that is on the ground.
Tornado warnings are now becoming increasingly urgent as the NWS sees how strong and violent the tornado is becoming, shown in radar reflectivity and a distinct CC drop. The tornado is now lifting debris into the air.
We have a large and dangerous tornado on the ground, confirmed by National Weather Service spotters. It is quite a picture. You can see here's Greensburg now. This tornado is only 7 miles southwest of Greensburg right now.
It's unimpeded. The atmospheric conditions out ahead of this supercell are prime. This long-lived supercell, once just a smaller rotating thunderstorm moving through Oklahoma, is now a monster wedge tornado, and it's now on its final and most powerful stretch.
Look at the size of that thing. This could be a 2-mile-wide tornado right here. I mean, the damage that we're seeing pretty much bears that out. Well, we knew this could happen.
Yeah, we totally knew this. This was not a surprise.
At 9:41, the NWS issues a tornado emergency for Greensburg. This meant that there was a certain and substantial threat to both life and property out ahead of the storm.
A tornado emergency for Greensburg. This tornado was located 5 miles south of Greensburg, moving north at 20 miles per hour. A violent tornado was on a direct path for portions of Greensburg, especially the eastern portions of town. Take immediate tornado precautions. This is an emergency situation for Greensburg.
And that's why we are emphasizing this storm here for the next few minutes, because it is so close to bringing a major tornado into a town.
Okay, it looks like now a tornado emergency has been issued for Greensburg now. You really need to get in the center of your house or your storm shelters immediately. Again, this is an emergency situation for Greensburg issued by the National Weather Service.
You know, those are words that our friends at the National Weather Service office in Dodge City do not use lightly, and they don't use them very often, and that really points to the gravity of this situation.
Greensburg Emergency Management does the only thing that they can do in this situation, which is to send out emergency personnel on standby and wait for the storm to pass. The 1,500 residents of Greensburg are also readying themselves, sheltering in place, and preparing for the worst. The Greensburg tornado is entering its final stretch after nearly 25 miles already on the ground, now at peak intensity and width. It's almost 2 miles wide. This is talked about a little bit in the documentary, but I wanted to touch on it again. There's something really scary about seeing your meteorologist or any meteorologist look concerned or give indication of being concerned.
It's 9:42 right now, so we're projecting an arrival time of somewhere between 7 and 10 minutes for you there in the Greensburg area. The circulation inside that storm, even if it's wrapped in rain and even if it's at nighttime. So we have an extremely pronounced signature here. I just have to tell you, I haven't seen one like this on a high-resolution NEXRAD Doppler radar in a long time. In fact, the last time I saw one of these, it looked this pronounced. You have to go all the way back to May 3rd of 1999.
One of the weatherman for one of the local affiliates came on, who's always normally very controlled, very matter of fact. He said, this is bad, this is very, very bad, this is the worst possible signature this can have on radar. You've got to take this seriously, and you've got to take cover. And that's when it really got my attention. That's when I started to feel a little surge of adrenaline then.
At 9:45 p.m., the tornado begins churning on the edge of the city.
Boy, I sure hate to tell you this, friends, but it looks like that thing is right on top of Greensburg. So your time is up. You need to be in your shelter right now. It is 9:47, and the arrival time at the very latest will be 9:50. So you should be in your shelter right now.
At this point, any lightning flash that would have previously illuminated the storm doesn't matter. The tornado is now so wide as it moves into Greensburg, you wouldn't be able to see either side. It's 1.7 miles in diameter, moving over the entire city. As it continues to move, the twister is taking a path directly over the center of Greensburg over Main Street, causing immediate catastrophic damage.
Okay, so now it would look like the circulation center has moved almost directly over Greensburg. It is right on top of Greensburg right now. I surely hope that we're wrong about this. I surely hope that it's a close call, but it's still an open field. But it looks like it is an extremely close thing. And again, I hope that those of you who are not affected will send a good thought your neighbor's way here in Greensburg over these next couple of minutes as this very dangerous situation unfolds.
A row of homes were immediately swept away within the first minute, 3 of those being well built and anchored to their homes, now gone. The tornado continues violent damage as it enters downtown Greensburg, flattening the city hall and every other home or business in its path. The water tower is crumpled. Several fire hydrants are pulled out of the ground. Trees are debarked. The ground is scoured. And vehicles parked in the city are mangled and thrown into people's homes. It's hard for us to even fathom the kinds of sounds and feelings that the people of Greensburg went through, the kind of trauma that they went through being in this sort of event. Gosh, it's hard for us to even sort of fathom the kind of violence that this tornado incurred on Greensburg. After being on the ground for almost an hour, as it exits the town of Greensburg, the tornado does a loop and dissipates. The Greensburg tornado was on the ground for a total of 65 minutes and continued nonstop for a total of 33 miles. The entire town of Greensburg had just been wiped out. And the fear wasn't immediately over for the people of Greensburg. Not only had they just been hit by a devastating tornado, there's now rotation again just outside of the city, threatening them again.
Looks to me like we very well could have another circulation here. It continues to be a concern. In fact, that last update really kind of convinces me even more that we've got another potential circulation. There's a new circulation developing just west of Greensburg over the town of Joy. Once we get past that, it's Haviland. And it continues to look like it is not only developing, but potentially wrapping back around and getting ready to go through Greensburg again. So those of you in Greensburg, we urge you to remain in your shelters. This is a developing situation with a new circulation on the back side there.
Fortunately, the tornado didn't hit the city of Greensburg. It would end up staying north of the town, but it did go on to produce another wedge tornado just after the Greensburg tornado. But the first one was already enough. These people were already so devastated. By now, it's just after 10 p.m. People that have just had the catastrophic tornado rip through their homes are trying to find their way out of rubble and make it out in the pitch black.
Y'all a county responder or just a chaser? I'm fire chief. All right, I guess I just got called from another chaser. Said just had one go over. Right here, huh? We were just in it. Supposedly got a farmhouse damaged 7-8 miles down the road.
You bet it leveled Greensburg.
Well, we're all professional firefighters out of Boston. You need some help?
I'm gonna have to get in and try to set up a command post.
Well,
it's safe.
all right, man. I'll tell you. We're going into the town of Greensburg. He said it leveled his fire station.
Another line, okay?
Works for us.
We want to go over to Jay because we're getting some unique footage from our storm chaser Lanny Dean coming into the newsroom.
There's nothing left, so not just the roof, but the entire backside, and of course this is the kind of destruction that we've seen in Greensburg all evening long, Jay.
Probably the west side of town of Greensburg because it was the hardest hit. This is coming into us unedited, and this is what they're looking at in Greensburg tonight. Dozens and dozens and dozens of homes, dozens of structures. The school, the high school was damaged. The hospital was damaged.
The sad part is that these people coming out of their homes don't realize it was just their homes or their neighborhoods struck. The entire town was now gone.
Almost every, we're talking about businesses, homes, schools, and of course tomorrow we will have extensive coverage all through the weekend and next week because we're talking about a major, right now we're just in the search and rescue with a lot of these.
As of a couple hours ago, there were still some residents unaccounted for, so I'm sure they're still in search and rescue operation.
The rest of the night was spent performing search and rescue operations and transporting injured to hospitals in neighboring cities. Despite having just gone through a traumatic event and losing their own homes, so many people in Greensburg helped with the recovery efforts and comforted others. There are so many good documentaries with survivor interviews on this event, and I really encourage you to go watch those if you're interested, and I will link those in the description. People are trying to find their family members, their belongings, their pets, their children, their neighbors, but unfortunately the full devastation couldn't be realized until the next morning.
In Greensburg's 1,500 residents can actually see the staggering extent of the damage. Both families discover their losses are sadly all too common.
Something you never envisioned before. To the level of destruction, the whole town smelled like a lumber yard, kind of. You could smell all that wood that had been ripped apart.
It didn't take long for emergency personnel to come into the city, see all the damage, and deem Greensburg as unsafe to inhabit, and there was a mandatory evacuation for the entire city. The damage is so bad in Greensburg they don't even know where to start. 95% of the town completely destroyed. And that doesn't mean the other 5% was spared. The other 5% was deemed as severely damaged.
5th, 2007. Greensburg, Kansas is reeling from an EF-5 tornado. The storm has demolished 95% of the town's buildings. Crumbled homes, crushed vehicles. The pattern of destruction seems bewildering.
Soon after, the National Guard would be called in along with Red Cross and FEMA for recovery efforts. And since now basically the entire city of 1,500 was now without a home, shelters quickly had to be established for safe lodging.
In the following days, a veritable army descends on Greensburg to assist the cleanup.
Unfortunately, looting would also be an issue, and I hate that we even have to talk about this, but it is part of what happens after tornadoes. And because of this issue, there was also a strict dusk to dawn curfew that had to be placed on the city. You can now see how the town is very quickly becoming like a war zone. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't ever remember having read an event where a tornado destroys 100% of the town. I know that there have been tornadoes that cause a town to become a ghost town. I've read those before, but I don't know that there's been a tornado like Greensburg where it was so large it completely engulfed the city and destroyed 95 to 100% of it. Unfortunately, a lot of even the historic parts of the town that we discussed earlier would be destroyed as well, including the big well, the largest hand-dug well in the world. And remember the meteorite we talked about earlier? The 1,000-pound meteorite that the town is known for? Well, it was initially gone. They couldn't find it, which is horrifying to think about, a 1,000-pound meteorite like in a tornado. It eventually would end up being found a little while later, not in its original place. It was actually flung somewhere else. We have to talk about the deaths. Unfortunately, the tornado would take 11 lives of people between the age of 46 and 84 and injuring another 63. And it's so heartbreaking because this is a community that is really small and tight-knit. So these 11 people were not only mothers, brothers, sons, daughters, these were people a part of a tight-knit community. So it's especially hard for a town this small because that is a huge part of who they are, is being close with their family and their neighbors. After reading more into the storm reports from the official report, I found that while a lot of the sources I read say 11 deaths happened in Greensburg, there were actually only 10 deaths in Greensburg and 1 fatality and another injury in Hopewell, which is that second tornado we talked about just after the Greensburg cell lifted, the one they thought would hit it again. It actually went on to Hopewell and would take another life. So that is where the 11 comes from. Greensburg does have a memorial for them. I'll show some pictures up on the screen, and it's important that we do acknowledge it. There is, I'll link the website where I found it. So they do have the memorial stone, but they also do have a memorial in one of their museums now. So if you're ever in if you're ever in Kansas, I think this would be a really cool historic place to check out. Go look at the memorial. I think that would be really nice. So the totals for this tornado, the maximum wind speeds were estimated at 205 miles per hour, which would be considered an F-5. It reached a peak of 1.7 miles wide, which is wider than the actual city of Greensburg. Damage for Greensburg alone was estimated to be at $153 million by 2007 standards, and the entire outbreak would be estimated at $268 million. Now, something important to talk about is that this was actually a multi-day outbreak. So May 4th, the Greensburg tornado, but interestingly enough, May 5th, the day after the Greensburg tornado, the SPC actually saw a greater risk for tornadoes and issued a high risk, which included a 30% hatched risk for tornadoes. That's double the day of the Greensburg storm. 30% is really extreme for the NWS to issue. High risks are already pretty rare. Really just shows the intense dynamic setup for this outbreak. There would end up being several dozen tornadoes on this day, but they weren't nearly the size and intensity of what occurred in Greensburg. But it was definitely an outbreak of its own. There were 80 confirmed tornadoes on May 5th, the day after, which is absolutely mind-boggling. For the entire outbreak of May 3rd to May 6th, a total of 139 tornadoes occurred, obviously mostly in the plains, and a total of 14 fatalities in Kansas over the entire outbreak. So as you can see, with a moderate and high risk back-to-back, this was an incredibly destructive couple of days. All right, let's talk about rebuilding Greensburg. There were a lot of people after the tornado who left Greensburg and did not move back. Can we really blame them? Rebuilding after a tornado or any natural disaster is already a really painstaking, slow and taxing thing to do that takes at least several months. But Greensburg was different. So not only are these homes having to be demolished and rebuilt, we're not talking about redoing roofs, we're talking about bulldozing your home and completely rebuilding it from the ground up. And not only that, the entire city has to rebuild. So we're not talking about a 3-month project, so we're talking about multiple years of having to wait for your city to have to come back. And not only having to rebuild, we also have to consider that these people have just undergone a traumatic event, and likely some of those people just didn't want to have to go back and sort of relive that trauma, relive that event, having to see the damage every single day. nobody can say that they blame them, right? Now, not only are the citizens of Greensburg at a crossroad, the city is also at a crossroad of what to do and how to do it. They knew that they were going to rebuild, but they had to try to rebuild Greensburg in such a way that some of the people might come back, or the town could draw in maybe some new people from other cities. Most of the time when tornadoes occur, cities will invest money to try to build things back better than they originally were to help draw in new people to really invest in the town moving forward. And Greensburg was no different. They really wanted to make sure that they were not only rebuilding the town, but rebuilding the morale and sort of helping make Greensburg a new and stronger, better city.
After this tragedy, when people had so much on their plates anyway, that to get them to consider how they might build more energy efficiently or greener was a daunting task. But these people were really up to it, and in fact they met the challenge with great enthusiasm.
So with all that in mind, the city council decides to do something different. They wanted to make Greensburg green. The city council decided to pass a resolution stating that all city buildings would be built to LED platinum standards, which would make it the first city in the nation to do so.
We talk a lot about green, and green basically developed out of a sense of what do we do next.
This one we knew called for an organization that was just devoted to rebuilding the town back green.
And at that point in time, we began to educate ourselves. We brought in some green planners, we brought in some green architects. We're going to put the green in Greensburg. We're going to do it right.
Now, this is a massive undertaking. Greensburg was able to do this by creating a nonprofit organization called Greensburg Greentown, which was to help the residents who chose to stay learn more about green living and how to be more sustainable. Because the City Council of Greensburg was certainly not able to take this massive undertaking on their own, FEMA was also on board to lend their expertise to help Greensburg plan all of this out. So what did this new city consist of? What did the green plan consist of? The first thing that they needed to do after cleanup was find a way to have sustainable energy. So the first thing they did was build 10 massive wind turbines to be the city's new power source. Their goal was to also end up being 100% renewable 100% of the time. So they accomplished that by all of the buildings being built to LED standards.
Of course, the city buildings, City Hall, the business incubator, those are LEED Platinum buildings, which, again, a huge accomplishment in a little community. Very pleasing. They function extremely well, very energy efficient.
This is the 547 Art Center in Greensburg, Kansas. 3 wind turbines outside that produce energy for the building, and also solar panels on the roof.
Any extra energy we can sell back to the grid, even though the wind's not blowing terribly hard today, we are making extra energy and selling it.
The wind farm is about 5 miles southwest of Greensburg, and there will be 10 turbines that are going up. Those 10 wind turbines will have the capability to power up to 4,000 homes, which more than includes Greensburg.
They also would become the first city in the U.S. to use all LED streetlights. They also collect rainwater for irrigation. All of the electricity in Greensburg comes from the wind energy from the turbines. They also have numerous vehicle charging stations and offer bikes to people, which if you think about for 2007, 2008 as they're rebuilding, this is really new and sort of a big statement from Greensburg, really trying to set the example for being energy efficient in a city and that it can be done. Despite it being a really massive undertaking, they really set foot to make Greensburg something different.
Makes complete sense in Greensburg, where wind destroyed the town, to have wind help rebuild it.
And this rebuilding would take years. I'm going to show some pictures of Greensburg immediately after. There's also pictures of Greensburg 1 year after and 5 years after, and you can see kind of why for some people maybe they didn't want to move back. It was a painstaking process, especially because they're rebuilding based on these new energy efficient standards. Okay, so why is the Greensburg tornado so historic? There's a couple reasons for that. So outside of the Greensburg tornado obviously being one of the largest and most destructive in history, it's a historic tornado for a few other reasons as well. The first being that this tornado was only the second time a tornado emergency had actually ever been issued, the first being issued in more of 1999. The tornado emergency we still use today and has proven over years to be effective at sort of mitigating injury and loss of life. So that is one of the many reasons why Greensburg is such a notable tornado. And the next reason, the one you are probably all familiar with, is that Greensburg was the first tornado to be rated on the new enhanced Fujita scale as an EF-5. So Greensburg was the first EF-5 tornado we had since the implementation of the new scale in February of the same year, 2007. So let's talk about the new Fujita scale and the surveys. The surveys are done after the tornado, of course. They're done by the National Weather Service, and the surveys done for the Greensburg tornado were conducted by Dodge City, and they confirmed 12 tornado tracks by the Greensburg supercell in Kansas alone on May 4th, which included 8 satellite tornadoes along with the 4 wedge tornadoes on that night. So absolutely historic tornado outbreak in Kansas on the 4th. So with the surveys being done with this new enhanced Fujita scale, there were plenty of indicators of EF-5 intensity with this storm, which included several homes across from the high school that were both well built and bolted to the foundations being swept away, and part of the school that was destroyed. A lot of it was flattened despite the fact that it had triple thick masonry walls. So these are indicative of EF-5 damage based on the new enhanced Fujita scale, and the reason why it did get this EF-5 classification. So it would get an EF-5 rating based on the new scale. The last tornado that would cause this level of damage, F5 or EF5, was more of 1999, which was an F5. There are very few things on this earth that can compare to the raw power and intensity of tornadoes. They are some of the most violent displays of nature, and it was well displayed on this day. So what about Greensburg now? Today, Greensburg is a model for green towns. It's often also called the greenest in America. The hospital, the city hall, the school are all built to the highest certification level of LEED, which is wonderful. They're really an example for cities moving forward. Now, unfortunately, when we usually talk about cities before and after, typically what happens is that once the city is rebuilt, slowly the population will either return back to what it once was, or the population actually increases after a number of years. This is not the case for Greensburg. Now it is 2022, and not only did Greensburg lose over half of their population the year after the tornado, it has never returned. So in 2020, the population had actually declined to 774 people, and it's steadily going down each year. So yeah, unfortunately, this isn't one of the cases where we can say, the population built back stronger and more people are coming in. It's 2022. That's not the case here. But that's not to say that Greensburg isn't still a great town. They have a lot of wonderful things to offer. Greensburg's also rebuilt back part of their history, so the world's largest hand-dug well has been rebuilt. There's a museum for it, which you can go visit. In that museum, they actually have one of the tornado sirens that was crumpled up in the museum if you ever want to check that out. And then the Meteorite Museum, they also rebuilt as well. The meteorites there. Yeah, so this has been the Greensburg, Kansas tornado, and this is a really heavy one. Overall, as a whole, the Greensburg, Kansas tornado tragedy is one of the hardest, I think, for me. It's up there with Gerald because it was just so devastating, and I think that what's particularly sad about Greensburg is just that they rebuilt, but the population never came back. So this one's pretty sad for me, honestly. I don't know what else to say. This one was a heavy one. The Greensburg tornado is such a historic event for so many different reasons. There's not many positive notes to leave off on this one. If anything, what we can do is remember the victims. And I think on days like this, when it's really hard to think of positives that came out of this event, what we can do is just make sure that we're helping educate people on tornadoes and tornado safety, along with all of the other information links I'm going to put in the description. I'm also going to be putting some, I almost said FAFSA, FEMA information and some government information from ready.org on tornado safety and precaution. I know if you're watching this, you probably are a severe weather fan and you probably already have a tornado safety plan. If not, now's a good time to start. I'm going to link them in the description. If you don't already have like a safe place that you know you're going to go to during tornadoes, if you live in a tornado prone area, even if you don't, they can happen in a lot of different places. So think about where you would go during a tornado event. That's all I have for today, guys. This one's a little bit heavier. I learned a lot from researching the event this week, and I hope you all enjoyed what I've put together. If you have any personal experiences, any information to add, or if you just want to let me know what you think about the enhanced Fujita scale and the ratings, the discourse that's been happening in the community lately, leave it down in the comments. I would love to know what you guys think. So thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.